The story begins with a hard number. Routed 17 times. 3 years, he never knew the woman emptying his trash was the body that had once held him. For 312 mornings at exactly 4:12, the woman pushed her wide grey cart down the marble-floored lobby of Kelmore Tower, the kind of building that owns a corner of every skyline in every city that calls itself a power. The cold air inside tasted the same every time. Recirculated, filtered, recycled so many times the lungs forgot they were breathing. Her hands smelled of bleach, lemon, and the faint, dry dust of paper. She wore the same green uniform every shift, the one with the stitched name patch that read simply Maria. Below the name, 2 thin gold stripes marked her as third-shift custodial lead. Her shoes were not new. They were quiet. They had to be. The residents on the 17th through the 20th floors paid a great deal of money to sleep without knowing that anyone was sweeping beneath them. The dramatic thing, the thing the viewer now knows but Marcus Kelmore does not, is this. The woman scrubbing the men's room on the 20th floor at 4 in the morning was once the most powerful black woman in the building's history. She had been its first chief financial officer. She had, 31 years earlier, raised a boy alone on nurses, wages in a 1-bedroom apartment in the city's South End. The boy, the very boy, was now Marcus Kelmore, founder and CEO of Kelmore Capital, and the very same man whose wastebasket she emptied before sunrise. She called this plan the long, quiet walk. She called it this for a reason. She had been waiting, slowly and on purpose, until he was ready to become the kind of man who could hear the truth of how his fortune had been kept safe. The explanatory scene is now. 18 years ago, Maria had been the one who hid a federal subpoena in a kitchen drawer for 11 days to keep a young banker named Robert Kelmore, Marcus's father, from losing everything in a single night. She had buried it under grocery receipts and butter packets. She had lost the man she loved in the silence that followed. Robert, frightened and grateful, had transferred his entire private accounts from the failing bank into her name for safekeeping, and he had died of a quiet heart attack 11 months later in his sedan, never having time to name the act. Those private accounts, grown over nearly 2 decades of patient work, were the seed money behind Marcus Kelmore Capital. None of that lived in Marcus's memory. None of it lived in his ledgers either. His ledgers only carried the public story. His ledgers could not carry this one. The ledgers had no folder for a mother who poured herself out. She had then signed up at the very first staffing fair after Marcus took the corner office on the 20th floor. She had known which floor he took before he did. The cleaning agency had been told that the third-shift custodial lead must be female, near retirement age, and quiet on the floors between 16 and 21. She had in fact paid the agency a small undisclosed contract fee to keep her on this particular tower, on this particular shift, on this particular set of elevation. The fee came from her. The fee was paid by a woman who already owned a great deal of the building and was buying the privilege of being near her son for the first time in 19 years. He did not know. He could not have known. She had made sure of that fact every morning for 3 years. Every night a small cotton towel lived in her back pocket. The towel was the callback object. It had belonged to her mother. It had belonged to her mother before her. It was nearly white when she first arrived. Now, after 3 years of polishing, it was grey and fraying, but it still smelled faintly of lavender soap because she folded it inside a soft plastic bag each shift, the way her own mother had taught her, saying that a clean cloth is not just a tool, it is a prayer that the world be handled gently. Every glass on floor 20, every chrome rail, every marble edge brightened at 412 carried some breath of that lavender. Marcus Kelmore passed it every morning and never smelled it. He moved through the world that his mother had made smooth without once asking who had made it smooth. The protagonist introduction is now. Maria worked 6 nights a week. She took the 7-Eleven bus home at 6:15 and slept from 7 to noon, because the third shift ran 11 hours and her body still needed 9. She sent $340 a month to her younger sister for the care of a teenage nephew whose legs had been injured in a road accident 2 winters earlier. She carried no debt. The apartment she leased was 23 minutes from her sister's by bus. It had a window that faced a brick wall 6 feet away, and the brick wall caught the sunrise at 8:41 every morning in the summer and lit the small kitchen a arm copper color that she liked to sit in for 9 minutes before she ate. Her diet was simple. Toast, bean soup, brown rice, sometimes a fried egg, often just tea and bread and 1 orange shared with the neighbor's child. She had no hobbies that required money. She liked very privately to watch the swallows gather above the parking garage at dusk in late summer. She said a small prayer of thanks for each one before she turned back inside. Her goal was the same every month. The goal did not change. It was simply to keep a quiet roof over her sister's house and to stay in this building on this shift, in this corridor, until the morning that her son's soul was ready to hear what loyalty costs and what love hides, and why a true mother will sometimes scrub the floor where her child sleeps just so she can be the one who is closest when he finally wakes up. The contrast figure enters now. Marcus Kelmore was 41. He stood 6'2". He wore dark suits tailored in a small shop in London that only opened on Tuesdays. He held degrees from 2 universities. He had, by age 36, taken a modest family inheritance, multiplied it 47 times over a span of 5 years, and built an investment firm whose quiet specialty was buying distressed small businesses and saving them without the press noticing. Marcus believed, with a sincere and quiet pride, that he had earned his life with his own hands. His staff did not correct this belief. His staff did not have a folder for what would have corrected it. The correction waited in a worn uniform with green stripes. Marcus had a habit that gave the irony its grip. Every morning at 9:15 after his first coffee, he walked the 20th floor alone. He liked to feel the silent building around him. He liked to know that his offices were still the cleanest on the block. He liked, when no one was looking, to test the chrome handrails on the stairs with the soft pad of his thumb, checking whether the night shift had done its work properly. He never saw Maria. He never saw anyone from the night shift. The night shift, to him, was a service that came from nowhere and delivered sparkle by sunrise. It was, in his polite business language, operational background. He never meant this unkindly. He just never thought about it at all. The first escalation begins in the small hours of a Tuesday in July. At 2:40 in the morning, Maria was waxing the long corridor on the 20th floor when the elevator opened, and Marcus walked out in his shirt sleeves, eyes red, papers under his arm. He had not slept in 2 days. A young company he had just rescued was about to lose its chief engineer, a quiet older man named Edward Bell, who was also the only person who knew how a specific piece of equipment inside that rescued firm worked. Marcus needed Edward to stay, and he did not know how to ask. Maria saw him before he saw her. She watched the boy she had raised walk into a wall he could not see, and she kept waxing. Her hand went still for one breath, then she kept going. He passed her without looking. He asked his assistant, at a normal office temperature, in a normal voice, whether anyone from the cleaning staff might have a family connection to industrial maintenance, and the assistant said that they did not, and Marcus went back into his office and closed the door, believing the world had run out of quiet hands. He did not know that the quietest hand on his floor, standing 22 feet away, had spent 26 years in industrial maintenance for a steel mill in Gary, Indiana, before her son was born. The gatekeeper appears now. A man named Paul Owens had been head of building security at Kelmore Tower for 19 years. Paul was 63 and he walked with a soft limp from a long-ago motorcycle crash. He had worked under Robert Kelmore when Robert was alive, and he had watched Maria hide the subpoena and lose the man she loved for hiding it. Paul knew exactly who Maria was and why she was here. He had not written it down. He had not written it down on purpose. The truth of the building lived in his memory and in several sealed letters locked in his desk. He watched every week to be sure she was safe. He also watched every week to be certain Marcus was still too busy to notice her. On the night in July after Marcus had gone, Paul came down the corridor and stood beside Maria for a quiet moment. He did not greet her, he simply nodded. She nodded back. Paul spoke first because Paul always spoke first in these small moments. He asked whether she had eaten. She said she had. He asked whether her nephew was walking yet. She said more each month. Paul then said the words she had been waiting 19 years for a man to say on this floor. He said, "Ma'am, he is ready. The boy has built a kind of fortune, and the boy has stopped sleeping, and the boy is about to lose something he cannot buy back. It is time." She set her wax can down. She folded her cot. "Tun towel," she said, "tomorrow morning I will ring the 17th floor office of Mr. Bell myself." Paul looked at her for a long moment, then he touched the corner of his cap and went back down the hall. The lavender on her cloth was very faint that night. The lavender was still there. Lavender is patient in this way. The tension begins its climb. The next morning at 6:12, Maria rode the elevator to the 17th floor and knocked on the door of Edward Bell, the engineer Marcus was about to lose. Edward was 68. He had a wife in hospice. He had been offered double his salary by a competitor who had flown him out for 3 weekends in a row. He was going to leave on Monday. He answered the door in a soft cardigan and saw a cleaning woman in a green uniform with 2 gold stripes holding a worn cotton towel. He was about to say he did not need service when she said the first true thing in 3 years. She said, "Mr. Bell, my name is Maria. I worked for 16 years cleaning the steel works in Gary. I know the rolling press you are losing. I know it the way a mother knows a sick child. I did not come to clean. I came to ask whether you would teach a young woman from this tower how to keep that press alive, and I will give her the rest of my shift to study under you, and I will lend you my nephew's small savings to put your wife in the home you have wanted for her, if you will stay and teach her. Edward sat down. Edward did not cry. Edward sat in his chair with his soft hands folded and looked up at the woman on his doorstep, and said nothing for almost 40 seconds. He did not leave on Monday. He agreed, because he did not believe a fortune should be wasted on a man who did not know how to ask, and because a woman in a green uniform had walked up to his door with a clean cotton towel and asked the right question with the right courtesy at the right hour. Maria went back to her shift. She waxed the corridor. She rode the elevator down at 6:15. She did not tell Marcus. Marcus called her by accident on Wednesday while she was sorting recycling. She picked up. Marcus did not know her voice. He asked for Paul Owens. She paused. She said, "Sir, Paul is on rounds, may I take a message?" He said he needed Edward Bell's home number. She gave it to him. Marcus did not know what he had asked. He did not know he had asked his own mother to help him keep the man who would save his company, and that his own mother, quietly and without charge, had already done more work that week than his entire operations team. The gatekeeper does his work. On Thursday, Paul Owens visited Marcus at the end of the day. He did not knock on Marcus's door. He knocked on the small side door that Robert Kelmore had used when he was alive, and Marcus had always left that door unlocked out of quiet respect for his father's memory. Paul had not used that door in 8 years. He used it now. He handed Marcus a thin sealed envelope. The envelope contained 3 items. The first was the original bank transfer receipt from 1994, showing that Robert Kelmore had moved his private accounts to a woman named Maria Louise Hall. The second was a copy of the federal subpoena, signed in green ink, dated 19 days before Robert's death and never served. The third was a single sheet of paper in Paul's careful hand that read, "Your mother is on this floor 3rd shift, 6 nights a week." Marcus read the documents in silence. He did not speak for a long time. Paul waited. The room smelled faintly of lavender soap. Marcus did not yet understand what the lavender meant. He would understand it later. He would understand it in a small way every morning for the rest of his life. The ethical fulcrum is now. This is the heart of the story, and the heart must beat slowly. At 4:15 on the following morning, Maria was buffing the men's room on the 20th floor when Marcus walked in with Paul behind him. Marcus was wearing the same dark suit he always wore, but his eyes were red in a way that no one had seen in years. He looked at the woman with the green stripes, and he looked at her hands, and he saw the hands of his own childhood, and the cotton towel from her back pocket and the small worn shoes. And he understood all at once that the woman who had hidden the subpoena, who had held his family fortune safe through 19 years of quiet work, who had paid to be near him on this floor, who had walked past his office 312 times, was standing 12 feet from him holding a mop and a lavender cloth, and had never once asked for a thing. He walked toward her. She did not step back. She set her mop against the wall. She folded her hands. She stood very still as if a great test were about to happen, and the test was not for her. The test was for her son. The test was simple. Would the boy who had grown up tall and rich and proud be able to meet the woman who had given away her whole life to make him tall and not try to buy her silence afterward? He said his first words. He said, "Mother." She closed her eyes. She did not speak. He tried to say more, and the more was a check, and the more was a townhouse, and the more was a title, and the more was all the things money can do. She opened her eyes. She looked at him the way a parent looks at a child who is trying to climb into the wrong kind of bed. She spoke in a voice that was calm, slow, warm, and utterly firm. She spoke for the entire room to hear, and the room was the entire building, although only 3 people were in it. She said 3 sentences, no more, no fewer, and every one of them was about a bigger thing than her son and his money. She said, "Marcus, I did not come here to be paid. I came here because you were forgetting what loyalty is, and every time you walked past me and asked if the chrome was clean, I was teaching you the lesson, and now you are ready, and the lesson is this. There are quiet hands on every floor of every building you have ever owned, and they have raised the buildings for you, and you owe them a future, not a check." She paused. She said, "The foundation can begin in this building, and it must begin tonight, or I will go back to my sister's house, and I will never come to this floor again." She said, "Finally, son, give the floor to them." He looked at his mother. He looked at Paul, who was standing in the doorway. He looked at his own hands. He nodded. He nodded twice. The first nod was a yes. The second nod was a thank you. She smiled the smallest smile he had ever seen, the kind of smile a mother has when her child has finally done the work. The systemic resolution begins at the morning. Marcus did not write her a check. He did not name a wing of his tower. He did not fly her to any warm coast. He did the larger thing. He did the larger thing because his mother had asked for the larger thing, and because his mother had raised him to be the kind of man who could do the larger thing when it was time. He did the larger thing in the open, and the open was the only place it would matter. At 9:15 that morning, before his entire senior staff, before his lawyers, before the young woman he had asked Paul to find, before Edward Bell and his wife's hospice nurse, before a quiet press invitation sent at 8 o'clock to 3 trusted newsrooms, Marcus announced the loyalty floor. The loyalty floor was not a name plate. The loyalty floor was a permanent endowment, seeded by 41% of Kelmore Capital's private founding profits. It was an open floor at the top of the building, dedicated entirely to anonymous aid for the working families of every person who cleaned, cooked, drove, stocked, lifted, carried, or maintained any of Marcus's buildings in any city his firm touched. It included full tuition for any child of a service worker to attend college in any accredited school in the country. It included a paid rest hour and a paid meal hour for every third-shift worker in every Kelmore building. It included a quiet policy that no senior officer of any Kelmore firm would ever again contract a cleaning agency that did not allow its staff to attend its own functions. He signed the papers at 9:43. The papers were a single page. The page had been drafted by Paul the night before, in lavender ink, on the same cotton-soft stationery his father had used. Maria stood at the back of the room. She wore her uniform. She did not speak. She watched her son sign the page. The watchers in the room were quiet, and the quiet was the kind that comes after decades of waiting. A young woman from the marketing department cried in a way that did not embarrass her. Edward Bell stood with his hand over his heart. The hand had helped roll steel in Gary for a quarter-century. The hand shook a little. The hand shook because the hand knew what loyalty meant and had nearly missed its chance to teach it to a boy who was worth $3 billion. The hand shook for a moment. Then the hand went still. The opening motif returns at the closing. Maria's nephew walked 6 months later, on a slow autumn afternoon, at a wedding that was held in the new loyalty floor, on a day that had been set aside by Marcus for the families of service workers in his buildings. The nephew walked across a wide oak floor that had been polished, in part, by the same woman who had once hidden a subpoena. The wedding had not cost Maria a single personal dollar. The foundation had paid for it, because the foundation had been built on the quiet work the wedding was now honoring. Maria wore a dress her sister had sewn from a curtain that had been in the family for 60 years. The dress was pale blue. The dress smelled faintly of lavender, because she had pressed it with the same small cotton towel that had lived in her back pocket for 3 years, and was now folded, finally, into a small cedar box beside her mother's good silver. The towel no longer worked. The towel did not need to work. The towel had done its work on a marble floor at 4 in the morning, over and over, without applause, until one morning it had shown a boy the right shape of a man. Marcus stood across the room from his mother. He did not hug her. He did not embrace her in public. He stood across the room because his mother had taught him that the loudest love is the kind that does not need a hug in front of a crowd to prove itself. He raised his glass. He raised it to his mother across a wide oak floor. His mother raised hers back. 2 clear glasses, full of cold water, met in the air without touching. Their reflections crossed in the window at the back of the room, and the window caught the sunrise at 8:41, the same copper light that her kitchen window caught each summer morning, and the same copper light that she had sat in, alone and quiet, for 9 minutes each day for 3 years, waiting for her son to be ready. The etchings on the foundation wall were her words. Her 3 sentences were carved, exactly as she had spoken them, into the marble at the entrance of the loyalty floor without her name. The carving did not carry her name on purpose. The carving carried her teaching and let the teaching stand for itself. Every cleaning worker, every cook, every driver, every security officer, every maintenance person in any Kelmore building in any of the 11 cities would pass that carving twice a day on their shifts. They would see the words and know that the words were true. The words were true because a woman had scrubbed a marble floor for 1,000 mornings without asking for a thing, and the marble floor had become, in the end, the right place to teach a 31-year-old boy the meaning of quiet hands. There is a small final scene that closes the loop. Maria's 3rd shift had ended 8 months before the wedding. Her sister's family was now safe under the foundation's tuition grant. Maria was at home for the first time in 19 years. The brick wall outside her kitchen window still faced south and still caught the sunrise at 8:41. She sat in the small copper light and drank her tea. The lavender towel was not in her pocket anymore. The lavender towel was at home in a cedar box, and the cedar smelled faintly of lavender because the towel had taught the wood how to be clean the way the towel had taught Marcus how to be a man. She looked up at the brick wall and said a small prayer of thanks. She said, "Lord, thank you for the 31st year, and for the boy became." She said, "Lord, thank you for the long, quiet walk, and for the steady friends who watched while I walked it." She said, "Lord, thank you for the chrome and the marble and the cotton and the lavender, and the floor that held me while my son became the man I was waiting for." She did not say more. The brick wall did not need more. The sunrise did not need more. The kitchen did not need more. The tea was hot. The towel was at peace. The boy was a man. The man had kept his promise. The promise had been kept in the open at a kitchen table in a small wooden box on a wide oak floor in 3 carved sentences in marble, in a quiet policy that paid a meal hour to a worker who had once melted into the background of the building she had saved. The promise was larger than her son. The promise had been written in the end, not by Marcus Kelmore and not by Maria Louise Hall, but by every quiet worker in the long, long line of quiet workers whose hands have always held the world steady, and whose names have never been on the building, and whose names, from this day forward, would be held in the marble of every Kelmore building in every city that the firm touched. And the names were not on the marble because Maria had asked for no name, and the marble had listened. And the marble still listens, and the marble will go on listening for as long as a cotton cloth, and a mother's firm and quiet love can teach a boy how to become the kind of man who refuses to make his mother's name into a brand. The story closes on the cotton towel. The towel is grey and fraying. The towel is folded around a small square of lavender soap. The towel is resting in a cedar box. The cedar box is on a small table. The small table is beside the window. The window faces the brick wall. The brick wall catches the sunrise. The sunrise is small and warm and copper-coloured. The copper light touches the cedar box and the cedar box glows for one breath, then the breath is gone. The towel and the box and the breath were the lesson. The lesson was the long, quiet walk. The walk was done. The walk had been worth every step. Thank you for staying with this story until its very last breath. If a quiet woman scrubbing a marble floor for 3 years without her son ever knowing who she was moved you in any way, then the best thing you can do for stories like this one is to subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell so the next quiet story finds you the moment it is ready. If this story stayed with you, share it with the one person in your life who has held a building up without anyone ever saying thank you. They will know what you mean. They will not need you to explain. The next story begins tomorrow morning. Quiet hands are waiting. The closing scene returns to the kitchen. Maria is still there. The brick wall is still there. The copper light is still there at 8:41, and it will be there tomorrow and the day after that for the rest of her life. Her nephew visits on Sundays now. Her nephew walks in with a soft new cane. Her nephew sets a small paper bag on the table. The paper bag smells faintly of warm brown bread from the bakery 2 blocks down. Her nephew does not tell her what the bread is for. Her nephew simply sits down across from her and waits for her to pour the tea. They do not speak much. They do not need to speak much. They have the kind of quiet that only families who have carried a long wait together know how to keep. Their quiet is not empty. Their quiet is full of the same lavender that lived in her back pocket for 1,000 mornings. Marcus sends her a single white envelope each year on the last day of October, the day his father died. The envelope has no check inside. The envelope has no letter inside. The envelope has a single dry sprig of lavender, picked from the courtyard of the new loyalty floor, dried in the building's archive and pressed into the page with a small gold tack. She places each year's sprig inside the cedar box next to the towel. The cedar box grows heavier by a single breath each October. By the time she is 91, the box will weigh 11 grams more than it did on the day the story ended. The 11 grams will be the weight of her son's heart, returned to her one autumn at a time, in the shape of a small quiet flower pressed into a plain piece of paper. She will not measure the 11 grams. She will not need to measure the 11 grams. The 11 grams is the size of a boy who finally understood that the loudest way to love a mother who scrubbed his floors in silence is to carry her flower home in the smallest thing you can carry and lay it down beside the cloth that did the work, and walk away in time for the sunrise to find her alone with her tea, the way she always wanted to be, the way she had earned the right to be, one quiet morning at a time. The marble at the entrance of the loyalty floor still catches the small breath of lavender that lives inside every clean cloth folded by every worker who passes it each shift. A young man on his first night, 28 years after the story ended, will walk past the carved 3 sentences on his way to his rounds and pause for one breath, because the words will sound, in the soft marble quiet, like a voice he has known since he was small without being able to name where he had heard it. The young man will not know Maria Louise Hall. The young man will not need to know Maria Louise Hall. The young man will simply bend down, adjust the soft cotton towel at his belt, and go back to work. And the marble will go on holding the words in place. And the words will go on holding the building together. And the building will go on holding the city together. And the city will go on holding the country together. And the country, in its turn, will go on holding every quiet hand that ever rose before dawn and walked into a long corridor and made the marble shine, because the marble had to shine. And the marble had to shine for someone, and the marble is still shining, and the cotton is still soft, and the lavender is still faint, and the long quiet walk is over, and the long quiet walk was always, in the end, the loudest love a mother has ever known. The first word you read was an opening hook about a mother who hid as her janitor for 3 years. The last word you read is the same cotton towel, the same lavender, the same marble, the same building, and the same small copper light. The same opening number returns, the same opening image returns, the same opening word in a sense returns. The story resolves in the silence that comes after the heart is shown the thing it had forgotten. The nothing that follows the silence is not empty, it is full. The nothing is the full weight of a life well spent on a marble floor at 4 a.m, year after year, until the marble became the right place for a man to read 3 sentences and begin a foundation, and begin a life and begin a country, and begin, in his own quiet sun, the kind of man who can press a sprig of lavender into a paper and carry it home in a white envelope for the rest of his mother's life. This is how the story goes. This is how a quiet woman changed a building. This is how a long quiet walk ended with a loud and permanent light that has not yet finished shining.